Hello,
And I
everyone,
still
and
can't get used to that jingle.
I was dancing over here. I was having a good time. I was
Same
like,
here.
okay, high
yeah,
production quality over here.
that
Love it.
music is fantastic. But let me first welcome the guest and thank you for joining us for episode 19 of Unsung Heroes of the Cloud, where we have special guest Kendall Roden, who will share more about container apps. But today is an extra special episode, not only because we have Kendall here, who's our first repeat guest, but also because it is our almost 1 year anniversary. We did our first episode exactly 52 weeks ago, or 364
God.
days. Just not a year, Mike.
Gee, time flies when you're having fun or when you're in the lockdown or whatever you call this thing. At least not a lot changed. I mean, we're still in the same living room. We still have awesome guests. We keep finding great unsung heroes, but already a year. I'm really surprised how time has flown. I mean, it's really
Yes.
amazing balls.
The one thing
Okay.
I'd say is a lot has changed because I feel like life is going somewhat back to a sense of normalcy. I've been
Yeah,
going
true.
to the office more often, and
Yes.
although I don't like going to the office, I actually enjoy being around people again.
Hey, actually, we get people congratulating us in the chat. That's pretty cool. Thank
Yeah,
you, Christian,
thanks,
for that.
Christian. But let's hand
So
it over
actually,
to
people are
Kendall.
watching us.
Let's talk about Kendall, because Kendall also has a lot going on. Like
Oh,
since you've been here, Kendall, so much has changed for you as well.
yeah, it's been hectic. So I've now thanks for having me on again. Congratulations one more time, just because that's a huge milestone. So it's hard to kind of stay dedicated and committed to some of these efforts because there's always a million things to do.
Hmm.
So kudos. But yeah, it's been crazy. I about I guess 4.5, 5 months ago switched over into the product management space. So now I'm a product manager for Azure Container Apps, which is I think why you had me on the show today, or you just wanted to catch up, fine with either. But yeah, so, switched roles. I'm actually gearing up to potentially make a bit of a life transition to Austin, potentially. With the new role, because we're actually opening a new developer division office over in Austin. So lots of hirings happening there. So there's a chance that I could relocate. My sister had a baby yesterday, so I'm now an aunt
Oh,
for the
so
first
cool!
time.
Congrats.
Thank you, thank you. And we didn't know the gender, so it was exciting to kind of to find all of that out yesterday at I think around I woke up at 4:30 a.m. to the news, so that was fun.
Uh,
Baby
Yeah,
girl or baby boy?
it's a baby girl. Yeah, her name is Cecilia Jane. So
okay.
Cecilia
And
super.
everything
Jane.
is going
Wow.
great. Everything is going great with mother, father,
Mhm.
and child. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
and
first
funny
one, I
enough,
think.
oh, I was just gonna say, funny enough, I actually, my mom recorded me finding out, and I had like a pretty emotional reaction, and it went viral. So like, it went like 7 million views on TikTok, and like hundreds of thousands of views on Instagram. And so like,
No, really?
yeah. So yesterday when she had the baby, ironically, like a bunch of other new like outlets had reposted it. And so I got to announce to like all these people that, hey, I know this video is when I found out, but the baby actually came today and it got like thousands of likes. It was really cool. It felt like the internet had a baby.
So you're
Um,
TikTok
Oh,
famous now.
yeah, I mean, at least I can check going viral once off my bucket list.
Yeah. So if you bring all of those 7 million views to our show,
Yeah.
we'll have you on for a third time.
yep.
Okay. Low barrier. That's a low ask. I think I can
Yeah.
do that.
But let's jump into the second time you're on, which is today. Like container apps, tell us what that's all about and why you decided to join that product team specifically.
Yeah, yeah. So, if y'all remember last time I came and talked about bot framework, which to me
Hmm.
really is an unsung hero in that I think there's a lot of capabilities of that product that just people don't know about, that I learned about through my journey in Azure. But my primary focus when I was on the cloud native global black belt team, which was the role that I was in at the time, was helping customers architect cloud native solutions using Azure. And then obviously multi-cloud has become more of a strategy for some customers. So really understanding open source technologies and things like Kubernetes that are powering a lot of that multi-cloud, capability. And so when I hit my 5 year anniversary at Microsoft, I'm almost at six now, so which is crazy. I started looking intentionally at what I thought I wanted to do moving forward, because every career move had really just been driven by doing well in one role and then having an opportunity come available and sort of like stepping directly into that role. And so I really wanted to take back a little bit of like, what do I want to do? What do I see my passion being long term? And through that process, I actually got a LinkedIn notification for a job that had 100% of match. Like it was like 100% of your skill set matches with this job. And so I looked at it and it said like Dapper, which is the distributed application runtime, which is an open source project I had been working on for a year. And then, it mentioned Kubernetes and microservices. And I was like, wow, that's really weird, because that's kind of exactly what I've been doing. And at the time, Container Apps actually wasn't even in preview. So they didn't even put it in the job posting. They just asked for the skill set. And it ended up being for Container Apps. And I already knew about the product internally because I had helped on some of the like bug bashes and sort of like internal stuff. And so, yeah, went through the interview process and here I am. So I think it's just a good combination, I think, of my skill set and passion for community, and then also my technical knowledge in this particular space. And it's worked out really well. It's definitely busy though. there's not a lot of sleep recently.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
Did I hear that correctly, that you found out about the job via LinkedIn? Not even via an internal channel?
So I kept up with internal. So I was having informationals with other internal product management roles within the developer division. So I did get a really good chance to network with people in that organization. But yeah, this specific role came up on LinkedIn first, and then I cross-referenced back to the internal rec. So
cool.
Yeah.
So pretty cool. Yeah, and of course, with every new product, you will have more work, right? It's that's a new launches makes new responsibilities, and they have it. And it all is coming down to you. So that's pretty cool. But yeah,
I was at an internal hackathon, or not an internal hackathon. I helped with a college hackathon this past weekend at my alma mater, the University of Alabama. It was called UA Innovate. It was like a female run hackathon / like innovation challenge. And I ran the product innovation category, which was really, really cool. Just getting to like share some of what it really looks like to go from like ideation to iteration on a particular product or feature. And I told them, I was like, I sort of have like self-imposed burnout because I can't stop working because I care too much about the product. Like, it's one thing when the expectation is to work late, but it's really more like I just can't seem to turn it off because I care too much about it. And I'm like, I need to work on that myself, honestly.
Yeah, I remember that feeling when I was writing the book, and I had the exact same thing. I was typing and writing and building demos up until literally up until midnight. And although it's a lot of work, it's enjoyable work if you see your product grow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But Kendall, you told us why you care about container apps. Why should customers care about container apps?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think one of the things that's the most compelling about the product is that there's a really clear problem that it's trying to solve. And I feel like sometimes, from a product perspective, we can kind of build something out and then try to find a user for it and test if there's a user base there. Whereas to me, we really went the other direction with container apps, and we recognized a user audience / like customer need and really built a product that I feel like is trying to solve that. So I think a lot of us can attest to the fact that Kubernetes has become the de facto standard for container orchestration. Containers have become super valuable for a lot of different reasons, especially from a portability perspective and a DevOps perspective. And so I think with the culmination of these tools really being recognized as valuable in the industry, and then the sort of how can we take Kubernetes, how can we take containers and make them more easily leveraged on the various cloud providers, which is how we got Azure Kubernetes Service, which I think has just completely grown and flourished and become a truly amazing platform with a lot of capabilities, a lot of bells and whistles for customers to explore and leverage. But the reality is, because there's so many options and because Kubernetes is so complex, the more that we surface up a lot of that open source capability within the platform, it becomes more and more overwhelming for some customers to manage. And I think the reality is, even as we provide lower barrier to entry like management whistles on top of it, right? Like, oh, we can handle this, we can handle that. It's still a lot for a large team to manage. And I think there's a lot of operational complexity, a lot of governance and security considerations when you move to Kubernetes or a managed Kubernetes platform. And so we really wanted to say like, okay, we've done really well in app service. Like we know this serves a really good need for teams that really don't want to manage infrastructure, that want to be able to easily integrate with other Azure services. And then we know we've done an amazing job bringing Kubernetes to our, to the Azure platform. So how can we kind of bring that more like PaaS-like experience onto Kubernetes? Because we don't want a small team or a team that doesn't quite know Kubernetes and doesn't really have an interest in learning it to have to do that in order to get up and running with their microservice applications. And while ACI or Azure Container Instances is really great for like VM workloads that may be running on, some kind of Docker host, and you just want to lift and shift those into Azure without having to manage like a VM, I think it's great for that. But when you start getting into like microservices and auto scale and service discovery, a lot of that capability isn't quite there. So I think we really have found a way to meet that need with container apps.
So
yeah, it takes the learning step out of it, right? The Kubernetes, the hard, steep learning curve for Kubernetes, taking that problem out. Okay, cool. Sorry, Linz, I interrupted you.
No, all good. Is it fair to say that container apps is serverless Kubernetes, or is that a bit too far?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the only thing that I caveat is while we're working on making sure we have a good app portability story and that there is, good migration paths to and from the platform to Kubernetes. I think the reality is just like Kubernetes is a lot, right? Like its features, its capabilities. So yes, I would say it's more like serverless microservices or serverless containers. Yes, it's powered by Kubernetes, but like when you say Kubernetes, people will assume it has certain capabilities and features that we might not actually expose in the platform. So it is running on Kubernetes. It is powered by Kubernetes. However, all of the bells and whistles and knobs that you get in Kubernetes are not all going to be configurable or surfaced to the end customer. So yes, I would say it's more serverless microservices or serverless containers on top of Kubernetes than just like serverless Kubernetes altogether.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. That distinction.
Kind of.
A little.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it'll make more sense once you show us.
I think sometimes a customer will say, "Oh, it's serverless Kubernetes, so I can do everything I can do in Kubernetes in this platform." But that's not going to be the case. So that's the only reason why I caveat that.
Yeah, but you can still use some of these things.
Yeah,
I mean,
of
from what I've seen so far, it's
and it
pretty
runs
cool
on
stuff. So.
Yeah, and it runs on Kubernetes. So yeah, it certainly is a serverless Kubernetes platform. It just doesn't expose all of the different features that Kubernetes would.
But I think things might become a lot more clearer once you show us, Kendall.
Yeah, you want to see it?
Yeah, absolutely. Take
it away. Okay, cool.
That's what we're here for, demos. Go.
Demos. Okay, sounds good. So I want to start a little bit by, I'm going to share my screen here. And I'm going to maybe I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to take a step back and walk through the code a little bit, and then I'll show you again, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to like set some context, maybe from the Azure portal, and then I'll sort of zoom in terms of like, okay, how did I actually get here though? So let me share my screen. I'm trying to make sure that I look at the camera, and so I'm going to only use one screen here. So let me make sure that you can see. All right. All right, let me know if you can see.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay,
if you could
perfect.
Zoom in a little, that'll make things a bit more clearer.
Yeah, just a little, just at that, like 10% or 15% or something. Yeah, that will work. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's better. Thank you. Yay.
Okay, so I just want to paint a picture for you. So, let's just say I'm a smaller team, or I'm a smaller team within a large organization, and I really want to containerize my services in order to get the modular deployment, in order to make sure that my application and all of its dependencies are bundled together. This application might actually run within Azure and other cloud providers, whatever my motivation is. But I'm a developer, and my goal is to get my container up and running as quickly as possible inside of Azure. So I started exploring container apps and did like a simple deployment with a container apps environment and some container apps. So essentially the way that this works is your container apps environment will essentially be your network boundary, and that sort of like the the network boundary, the isolation boundary, where you can deploy multiple container apps. So that's the way that that works. So I'll have a single container apps environment here. And then I have within that container apps environment, I have a couple of different container apps. So a container app, one of the things I want to caveat, it's not just like a container image that's running as a container, right? Like it's an actual Azure primitive and paradigm. And within a container app, not only do I pass in information around the containers that are running inside of it, be it like your primary code or a supporting sidecar, both of which can run within a single container app. But it's also going to have certain information around like scale rules and ingress. So we can see here that I have an album API, and you can see here that I already have this like application URL. So this application URL is actually a fully qualified domain name that gets auto-generated for me whenever I set the ingress for a particular container app. So in this case, if I take a look at the ingress settings, and I'm going to show you like why I set things the way that they did, why I set things the way I did and how that works. But you can see here, instead of going and, let's think of the Kubernetes world, right? I deploy my my Kubernetes configuration, including like a Kubernetes deployment, a Kubernetes service. Then maybe I go like install Nginx via Helm chart, and I set up an ingress controller and ingress rules. So like, let's take all of that out of the equation. Instead, just say I bundled my everything into a container apps config. I deploy it onto container apps, and I can specify if I want to enable or disable ingress. And then if I enable ingress, I have two options here because I'm not doing a VNet integrated deployment. So I can limit the accessibility to other microservices or applications within the container apps environment. So basically this would be sort of like an internal Kubernetes service. And then I can accept traffic from anywhere. So that means that basically I can accept public internet traffic. So I can get a fully qualified domain name that's accessible from the public internet. And then I pass in a target port, which basically just says like, hey, where's my container actually going to be exposed? So this target port should actually match up with like your exposed within the Docker file for your container.
And can I ask you a question here, Kendall?
Sure.
I noticed that the target port is 80. Are you taking care of SSL as well here?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So we're handling that for you. So we're doing TLS. And then what we have coming is basically the bring your own cert capability. So you'll be able to bring your own certificate, bring your own DNS, or set up DNS yourself.
Cool.
Then on top of that, we also have this concept of secrets. So like secrets are an application level paradigm. So obviously within my container apps, within my container app, I might need to access certain Azure resources, or in this case, I'm wiring up Azure Container Registry to actually pool my image for the container apps. You can see here I set a secret. We're also working on in the future doing like key vault references, and managed identity is coming soon. So your actual container app itself will have a managed identity. So that is something to consider. And then we have this concept of revisions as well. So essentially within a specific container app, I can either set it in multiple revision mode or single revision mode. So you'll see here, I can choose a revision mode. I can either have multiple active revisions, or I can have a single active revision. I think multiple active revisions is interesting because you can basically take advantage of our traffic splitting capability. So for example, if I was to make a change to certain configuration within my container app, it will create a new revision for me. And then I can basically say, hey, I want to do some kind of like A/B testing, or I want to hit the endpoint before I actually roll traffic over to it, or I want to have a 50-50 split from an ingress perspective and hit both revisions, half the time.
Or maybe do a little bit of API version management for end customers, or isn't that the goal in the end?
Yeah, like I do think that the goal is for it to be a version. I think one of the things you'd have to think about a little bit is the way that traffic splitting works now, and we are working on some other capability to help make this a more flexible model. So, and I will say too, like as a caveat, a lot of even this UI is going to change and evolve because we're doing a lot of quick pulse studies to get feedback. So that is something that I want just to be a caveat, right? Like this is a product that's being, currently built. We're iterating on ideas. We're modifying the user experience to make it better. So those are all things I just want to call out here. But like, for example, right now, the way that traffic splitting works is like if I set up a traffic split, let's say 50% is going to revision 1, 50% is going to revision 2. It's not quite going to act like that versioning system that you mentioned, because the endpoint, anytime that you hit that ingress endpoint for Album API, like it's going to be split across and load balance across those 2 revisions. So like the user isn't really getting to say, oh, I only want to go to revision 1. Instead, they would be 50-50 split across the 2. But I think that's a great point of feedback, and definitely something that, coming from the Kubernetes world, is a little different, because you would set your ingress at a higher level of abstraction, right? You'd have your like ingress split or your service that's sitting on top of multiple deployments. And so, yeah, it's a valid thought. And I think we'll continue to iterate on what works best for customers as we see them leverage the capabilities.
It's cool to see that you're listening to that, because I think people might be, because they probably will see that, oh, this comes in with API management integrated, like kind of that that kind of view on it.
Yeah.
But it's cool to see that it actually just works out of the box with load balancing and ingress, and that you don't have to worry about that anymore, because typically a lot of people go take ingress controls like really, really bad, and they don't have no clue what they're doing. So this is really, really cool to set up. That's,
and I can
pretty
show y'all,
nice.
I can actually show y'all it in action too. Like I'll show y'all what a revision, like a multiple revision mode app would look like. But I agree. Like I think that's one thing we want to emphasize with this product is like we're truly like we're built on open source technology, and we're really trying to build it with as many customers as possible. So I know that like my calendar is constantly full of customer meetings and figuring out ways that I can connect with people on Discord. We actually have a Discord channel where we're like iterating on ideas and getting feedback. Where, like I said, we're having these studies with customers directly to try to get their feedback on, the user experience. So we really, really hope that we can continue to be more and more transparent with our plans for the product and the kind of things that we're working through. So I appreciate you calling that out. So I just wanted to show you very quickly, like in the portal here. And obviously I have some other things that we could take a look at. Like we have the album viewer, which is its own container app. And once again, things that are coming, we have bring your own, or like setting up DNS custom domains. We have like bring your own certificates. We have a managed identity coming. We have some really great like observability improvements around log streaming, and even like a Kubernetes like exec type of experience with a container where you're able to basically like connect to one of the actual running container apps and be able to see what's going on in the environment. So we think from a troubleshooting perspective, that'll be really great. So those are a few things I wanted to call out. So I have in here, we have an external and an internal. So I just wanted to call out that in addition, one of the capabilities we saw from a lot of enterprise customers is like, how do I wire this up where all of the IP addresses for not just my environment, but the actual container apps are coming off of my VNet. So we do have bring your own VNet integration. So you can see here, I have the same container apps. I have a container app environment. I have a container registry, but I also have a couple of other things, including a couple private DNS zones, and I have a virtual network. So basically within my virtual network, I have a couple of subnets here. This is another area where we're investing. So you can see here, I have 2 subnets that are actually applicable to my environment. The first one is the infra subnet, which is where all of our container apps and our environment and all of the control plane components for the container apps environment will come from. So that's your apps and the control plane components for container apps. Okay. And then we have this like app subnet. So this app subnet is actually going to be optional moving forward. So we'll actually hide this, and then we're going to lower the IP constraints for the infra subnet. So instead of having to provide 2/21s, you'll just provide one subnet, and that subnet will actually be able to have more flexibility. It won't have to be a /21. So I think
it's not going to be like fixed subnets that you're like we see in other products, like with gateways and stuff, that you're going to inject something but users can use this freely, right? They can decide on freely, right?
So yes, yeah, you can bring your own like the same way that when you set up a Kubernetes cluster, you can specify your own virtual network. It'll be very similar to that experience. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to call that out. Like right now, we're really requiring a lot more IP addresses than we need, and that's going to be changing here soon. So I set up a subnet for my container apps environment, and obviously like the entire VNet is associated. And then what I did is I basically, when you create your container apps environment, you're going to get a single static IP address. So when I did the container apps environment deployment, instead of getting a public IP address, which is what I got in the external deployment, I'm going to get an internal IP address, like an internal load balancer. And then basically what I can do is create a private DNS zone in order to associate that IP address with the domain. So like right here, we're seeing the default domain for my environment. And then we set up an A record that basically says like, hey, any traffic that's bound for my private DNS zone, I want, or to my private, not private, but my DNS or like my domain for the environment, then I want you to basically resolve that to the static IP of the container app environment, if that makes sense. So we've associated this, this DNS record with the static IP address of the environment. And then basically the one thing I wanted to show you that's a little bit different here before I get into a little bit more, and I want to be cognizant of time, but I can go as deep here as I want. I have bicep templates. I have like deployment via CLI. I have the code itself, or I can just demo it to you and show you. We can talk about Dapper. It uses Dapper. Like we could really go a lot of directions, but if we need to cut it off too, we can do that. So if I look at my, I wanted to show you, if I look at my album API, for example, in this case, so before we had the ingress setting set to external, but you can see here, because I'm VNet integrated and I set up ingress, I now have two different options. It's limited to the container apps environment, so it can only be called by other container apps that are hosted alongside of it, or it's limited to the VNet. So basically that means I deployed an internal only environment, so I can only access this application from within the VNet. And I can actually like show you this really quickly because I think it's, yeah.
Kendall, if I can ask you a question, it also has the option container apps environment only. Does that mean that I can deploy apps into that environment that can't even be reached from within the VNet?
Yeah, exactly. So this is an option that's consistent across both deployment models for environments. So that's basically going to act as like an internal Kubernetes service, right? Like only other container apps can talk to this. So a good example of this would be the Album API, actually, because let's say hypothetically we weren't exposing the API to callers directly, we were only calling it from the Album viewer, then my Album viewer can be exposed externally and my Album API can be limited to the container app environment. Make sense?
Yep. Makes
Cool.
sense.
Cool. So I can actually show you that if I have a VM, if you saw here, and I'll get this all set up in just a second. One. Okay. So one thing I want to call out here is, okay, so I set up a virtual machine in I just want to make sure that you believe me here because I didn't necessarily show it to you. So if we look here, you can see that within my internal resource group, I also have a virtual machine. That's the virtual machine that I'm connected to now. And then essentially, because I have that domain resolution that I set up, or at least registration there, I'm inside of the VM. And what I can do is I'm going to hit this endpoint. Now, what's going to be interesting here is we might incur some cold start, specifically because of the fact that I may have scaled this down to 0. So that's another thing to consider, right? With container apps, you can actually scale to 0. Okay, I didn't. I probably had one instance running. So you can scale to 0 and you'll have no cost, but you're going to incur a bit of cold start whenever you hit it for the first time after, 24 hours or whatever the last time I hit this is. And then you could obviously also scale down to like a minimum number of replicas instead. But you can see here's like that really basic like Albums API. And when I hit that endpoint, it gives me a list of albums. So what's going to be interesting, let's go ahead and do a quick exercise here. I want to go back to the Azure portal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go change that Album API to internal to the environment only. So we were just talking about it. So let's actually make it real here. Let me see if I can click in.
Break it.
I just opened Spotify on accident, I think. Okay. So we're going to limit this to the container apps environment only, and then we're going to save. So I just want to call out ingress and secrets are two changes that will not create a new revision in multiple revision mode. So while this is loading, this is just a good time to caveat. So things that will update, like let's say I'm in multiple revision mode instead of single. Things that would create a new revision are going to be things like changes to the template section of my bicep file. So that might be something that says like, hey, I actually changed the image. So I'm now like, let's say I've changed my application code, I've deployed a new image and I pulled that into the container app itself, like that's going to create a new revision, obviously. And then things like environment variables, if I add a new environment variable, that's going to create a new revision. So there's specific changes within a container app that will create a new revision, and then certain changes that are applicable across revisions. So I can't enable or disable a specific revision from ingress, right? Instead, I either disable the entire container app or enable the entire container app. So okay, now we should see that this is updated. So I should not be able to hit this endpoint anymore. Fingers crossed. It may be cached. Okay, so no longer able to hit that endpoint.
It's
So
cool.
what's cool is I also have the front end that's running. So let's go hit the front end. So this is publicly exposed. So what we should expect is that the front end will come up. And once again, it might have scaled down to 0. So we might see a little bit of cold start here. But do you see how it's still hitting the backend API? So it's still able to retrieve the albums, but we're only hitting this endpoint. So I think that's just a cool example of like, okay, now let's take this exact same like name, right? Like the exact same URL. And I can try to hit it from my local machine, which we know shouldn't work because it's an internal only environment. And once again, that means it has no public IP. So let's try to hit that endpoint. So nothing happens, right? It doesn't work.
Yay.
So that's the actual application itself. And as I mentioned, I have some other cool things just to think about. When you do VNet integration, you obviously also can use things like private endpoint. So for example, I'm actually retrieving all of those albums not directly from the API. It's not a static collection. It's actually I'm using Dapper and I'm calling out to Azure Storage. So I have to connect to the Azure Storage account within my resource group. And so I'm able to do that in a secure fashion using private endpoints. So I was going to look and see if I had that storage account. So this is where those Dapper albums are sitting. And I have all of the network traffic like completely turned off, except for the private endpoint specifically from my container app VNet. So if I take a look here, I created a private endpoint and associated it with the subnet for the container app environment in my VNet. So I was just going to show you so that you believe me here, but we'll see if it'll load. Do you have any other questions about this? I know we might be out of time, but I'm happy to continue showing how I actually got this deployed, but totally up to you.
I think so many more questions, but we are
Yeah.
running out of time. But I this was super cool, and I just say, people who are watching this and who want to learn more, write a comment on YouTube, give us a tweet to Kendall, Mike, and me, and we might have Kendall on again to show us how she deployed everything.
Yeah, maybe we should do a Kindle workshop or something. Azure Unsung here as Kindle workshop.
Yeah, and also, I don't know why this networking tab isn't loading, but I do want to call out just like that's you made a good point, right? So like, how can I actually let me go back to seeing y'all on camera 1 second. How like for anybody who's like, how do I actually like play around with some of these things? So stop. So we have a lot of progress in terms of like documentation and great resources. So for example, this albums app, I have like the fully VNet, deployed bicep template for all of this. I also have like the code samples. And so we're actually working on taking this albums app and turning it into a progressive tutorial path. So we'll have a quick start and then essentially we'll have a path where it's like, okay, show me how to do revision. So one of the cool things is like the albums app, we actually have set up to do revisions where you can like change the background and just immediately see how traffic splitting works. And so we're going to continue to iterate on this. And I showed you a Dapper enabled sample, but we actually have some that are not Dapper enabled. So I think in the future, just keep an eye on the documentation because we will have really good comprehensive walkthroughs for some of this content that I'm showing you right now.
Okay. And what is the best way for people to stay up to date with all those changes? Do they just follow you or are there certain other resources to follow?
Yeah, so I have a lot of resources that I would love for all of you to take a look at. So one of them is our public GitHub repo, and a lot of things are linked there. So it's aka.ms/ACA-roadmap. So aka.ms/ACA-roadmap. So that's going to have everything from like what features are we working on? We're working on actually publishing our public backlog there. If you're interested in some of the upcoming features, you can actually look at our issues and filter by the roadmap label, and that'll tell you everything that we've committed to. We also have a Discord channel that you can join directly from the GitHub page. So a lot of stuff is going to be there, and then a lot of things on Discord. Basically, there's no questions that are off the table, so feel free to ask any questions that you have directly on GitHub or on Discord.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Kendall. This was great. I have deployed a container app before, but it's been a couple months, and I've seen that the platform has evolved so much. So, thank you
Yeah.
for joining us. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing the demo and sharing the information. And Mike, to you, happy anniversary!
Yeah.
Yay!
Congrats.
I should have brought cake. I didn't totally. I'm such a bad husband, you know. Not bringing flowers, not bringing cake, forgetting anniversaries. Feels like my wedding all over again. No, no, no. No, thanks again, Kendall, for
Thank
joining
you.
the show. It's always a pleasure to see you online. I hope to see you in the flesh anytime soon. I heard you were coming over to Europe. Is that right?
I might be doing a stop through in Belgium, so we'll see. We'll see.
I hope. I hope.
Yes, I'll let you know.
No, no.
I'll let you
Yeah,
know.
please let us know.
Okay.
Please let us know. And it's always fun to see you doing demos and talking about cool stuff. So enjoy the ride at the ACA team further on.
Thank you.
Okay.
See y'all.
And being an aunt. Bye all.
Come
Oh,
on, I'm
you're
waiting for my
far young.
music.